Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Good morning to those in the chat. Good morning to those joining us from the region, from Europe, and everywhere where you are. My name is BTR1, and I am the Regional Network Coordinator for the Anglophone Caribbean Network of the Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency Global Support Program. And we are so happy to welcome you to this morning's webinar on building confidence in biennial transparency reporting, key tools and best practices from BTR1, the Biennial Transparency Report 1. So it's a pleasure of mine to join you as we continue to strengthen our efforts in the region in advancing climate transparency across the Caribbean. So Civic GSP has been a dedicated partner in bringing support to developing countries like ourselves as they transition to the ETF under the Paris Agreement. And this network in particular brings support to the English-speaking Caribbean region. And so as a key aspect of the ETF, the Biennial Transparency Report, which represents a significant step forward towards global climate accountability and tracking our collective progress under emission reductions, adaptation measures, and financial flows. And as you know, although the official deadline for BTRs has passed in December of 2024, it continues to be a critical report for countries to really show what they're doing in the climate space, and also attract support from the developed world and as well as donors for continuing efforts on domestic climate transparency efforts. So just a bit of a background before we officially get started. As of January 2025, 91 countries have successfully submitted their first BTRs, of which 13 were least developed countries and small island developing states. And some of them we have in the room with us this morning. So countries are continuing to work towards finalizing their reports and strengthening their technical and institutional capacity in this area. So for this reason, we know that this topic is of critical importance for the Caribbean region, as we have various other countries who are still in the process of putting their BTRs together. So we hope to hear and get some inspiration from the countries who have submitted their first biennial transparency report, as well as hear today about some of the tools that are available from Civic GSP and others that are designed to support the BTR authors, the countries, the persons involved in putting together the key components of their reports. And we'll also look into some of the best practices and some of the innovative solutions that have emerged from the first round of BTR submissions so far. So thanks for joining us, and we look forward to a engaging webinar session. So this session will last 1 hour and a half, and we will invite you all after the first presentation to take a group photo. So just letting you know that, be prepared and to turn on your cameras if you're able to after the first session. But before we start, some meeting housekeeping. Your microphone will be temporarily disabled, but you will have the option to enable it when there's times for asking questions. So during the presentations or during the screen shares, please feel free to use the chat if you have questions, to hold your questions. But after each presentation, you will have time allotted for discussion and to raise questions yourself. So therefore, before speaking, please use the virtual raise hand function. And when you do speak, please identify yourself with your name, your country, or your organization.
I'm unable to hear anybody.
And Anyone else hear me?
I can hear you
hear
clearly.
Lloyd.
Can hear you.
I can hear you.
I can hear you, Brittany.
Thank you, folks. I will put in
Oh.
the chat some suggestions for Miss Debbie Deal. Maybe that you have to check your settings. We'll be with you in a
Okay,
moment. We'll get
okay.
Maybe what she can do is log out and log in back. It could be that she may have put it on the different audio settings.
Thank you very much for that suggestion.
I'm assuming that when the event starts, that we would be able to hear everybody. And now I'll mute myself.
And then just the last slide. This is what we'll be taking you through for this morning. So we'll be hearing from our team member from the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center to hear about the tools that are available, the Civic GSB self-assessment tool. And following that, we will have some space for discussion and Q&A. And that's the point where we will ask everyone to put on their cameras for a group photo. And then for the remainder of the session, we will hear from our esteemed colleagues from the region, from Belize, Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana on key points and tips for preparing the BTR1 and those that would be beneficial and key takeaways for the rest of the region. And then we'll wrap it up. And then in the meantime, right before we get started, I just want to hear a little bit from you all to see where we're coming from, what we're looking forward to. So I invite you to, you can use your phone or you can enter on your computer or your device, going at www.menti.com and use the code on the screen, or you can scan this QR code. Give me a thumbs up from when you're home. Colleagues, let me know when you're in. I see you have some people in. Okay. From where are you joining us today? You see you have a lot in the Caribbean, lots of these little dots there, some from Belize. So you have some joining us from South America. On the other side of the world, welcome. We have quite a few popping up from the Eastern Caribbean. And so I wanted to know just a little bit, what's your primary role in your country's BTR preparation? And as we go forward, don't skip ahead too far, because we'll be coming back to some of these questions later. So are you a technical expert, contributor, coordinator? We have some coordinators here. Most of us are technical experts. Some of us are observers. Some of us are reviewers. Right there. This is important to know, because we'll see what you take away at the end, depending on what your role is. And what's your country's current stage in BTR preparation process? So you have quite a few that have already submitted. So you have at least some in the room, maybe from the region, maybe from outside the Caribbean that have already submitted. At the final stage, just a couple. I mean, some in planning, some in just getting started. So we welcome those who are, regardless of what stage, there's always something to learn and something to contribute as well. And so which BTR reporting area do you anticipate will be the most challenging for your country? We have GHG inventory taking the lead, and possibly could be the most challenging. Data collection and management, we know that tends to be a big challenge for this region. And then we also have tracking NDCs, maybe some challenges on institutional arrangements. 15 minutes. And this is the last question I'd like you to reflect on for this Mandy. What do you hope to gain most from today's webinar? So we're right on the money. Technical insights on specific BTR sections. So we hope to open up more discussions after our countries and our speakers are speaking today. So please feel free to ask them the questions. That is the purpose of this type of webinar. Data collection and management, understanding common challenges, connecting with peers facing similar challenges. So thank you very much, colleagues, for participating. And this gives me it gives all of us a good idea of where we're starting this session. The profile that you're having. So without further ado, then that takes me to introduce you to our first speaker of the morning. We have Mr. Francesco Locatelli. He is a project officer at the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center and also supports very much the CIBIT GSP activities in this region, and will take us through some of the tools that CIBIT GSP has brought in preparation for countries submitting their BTRs last year and this year, taking us through some of the key insights from that tool. So Francesco, thank you very much and welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Brittany. Good morning, everybody. As Brittany already introduced me, I work with the CIBIT GSP team in Copenhagen. And I just want to share my presentation. Let me know if you can see the screen in presentation mode.
Not yet in presentation.
Not yet. I click on that. Yes, should be now.
Yes.
Perfect. So the presentation of today, it's it's not going to be too long. I'll try to stick to 15, maximum 20 minutes, and then I'll be happy to answer also some questions about it. It's about the work we do, also part of the work we do here in Copenhagen in supporting the countries in developing their BTRs. And in the last months, since the in the last month, since the deadline was December, but obviously countries were working at different stages on the BTRs, and it was the first BTR. We offer this opportunity to support them by giving what we call a quality review check assessment of their BTR, which means basically just that we were simulating a technical expert review, and reading. It could have been the whole BTR draft document, or the countries were also like invited just to share one single chapter draft, or the BTRs. Sorry, I'm not. Okay. Did I lose my screen? I'm not able to see it anymore. Brittany, are you still able to see my screen?
It came back.
No,
No, okay. I don't know what happened. I don't know if someone. Okay, let's see now. Should be back. I don't know. Sorry for the inconvenience. Is it okay?
We don't see the presentation, but you can see your screen.
Let me just 1 second. I don't know what happened, but building, share this. Let's try again.
Okay, it's back.
Okay. Sorry for that. So I was just saying that countries were invited to share either the full draft document of the BTR, or just a chapter, or even just some CRT or CTF tables to us. And we were like, with the team of colleagues of mine, which are expert in different areas, we were like simulating a kind of a simplified version of the technical expert review, which is a process that all parties, all you will undergo a few months after you will submit the BTR to the UNFCCC. And we were coming up with kind of a certain assessment, a recommendation, and eventually also some questions. Obviously, we were also keen on having follow-up discussions on the work that the countries were submitting to us, sharing with us. So we supported more than 32 countries as of February 2025. And yeah, I want to share with you a little bit on how we did it and what are some outcomes of it. So the tool we used, and I mean, I want to say we developed, but the first thing I want to say is that it's not a fancy tool at all. It's a tool that actually, I mean, we will share it also you will able to get this, but it's basically nothing more than an Excel sheet where we brought inside all the MPGs divided by section. Here you can see just like I took a screenshot of one of our work. And on the left, you can see the MPG provisions divided by section and subsection. And then the work of the TR first is to check consistency between your report, the informations you bring in your report, with the MPGs, which is the guidelines for everything that should be inside your report. And besides that, we just basically built these few columns. In the first column, the coverage column is just a yes, no, partial. Is compliance with it's whether we found the information that was supposed to be there in the report, or the CTF tables could be yes, no, or partially. And then this is an extra column that we included. It's just like, where is this information supposed to be? Just like for us to help us be better to find it, but I guess also for who's working on the draft on BTR could be useful. And then we just a comment section that we provide then this document, this Excel sheet we provide it to the country, so the country knows exactly which provision is partially, totally, or not fulfilled in their document. Obviously, besides that, we also review the full document. We give comments. We put comments in either in the PDF or Word file, and we also share that back. So with the sum of these two tools, like the simple comments on the text and the Excel sheet, I think the countries have we got a pretty good feedback that the countries have already like a good overview of which part to improve and which are already like fully consistent with the MPGs. And so the countries were able to enhance some parts, work a little bit, adjust some details here and there before submitting to the Secretariat. So, well, this is just a little example. You can see like it's a shell. It's about the PAMs, so action, policies, and measures. It's one part of the NDC tracking chapter, which is very important. And you can see some name, description, objectives, and in this case, this was fulfilled. And then, for example, in the CTF table 5, but also in the text part, the type of instrument was missing. So that was an easy comment like, please add the cell for this classification. And then there are some other details, like, for example, the status, the line just below, which is a partial coverage. It was just about the terminology, where ongoing, the country used the ongoing word to define the status of the policy, but ongoing is not an official terminology defined by UNFCCC. So we encourage the country to use planned, adopt, or implemented, which are the three official words to describe this. So this was just an example. This is about, for example, another extract from the inventory. Just some samples. I just copy pasted some minor, some just like single provisions. And I want to say that in our case, we don't differentiate that much in the way we assess them in between should and shall provisions. We assess them like if it's compliant or not. Obviously, the shall provisions are more important, and the country is highly encouraged to fix those. The should provision, it's up to the country to work to fulfill those as well. But I just want to say that our feedback is kind of treating all provisions the same, and then it's up to the country to assess and decide which part to work on to assign more priority. So just like, for example, the first example, provision 27 in the MPG is about methodology. So every time the party uses surrogate data, extrapolation, interpolations, they should provide the technique, the methodology, and the parameters, and all the process they used to access, actually to retrieve this information, to calculate these informations. And for example, in this case of this single review, data interpolation was used. The country explicitly said, rightfully, that they used data interpolation, but then they didn't explain how this was carried out and what was the methodology. And this 100% is going to be a question that the reviewer is gonna ask you in the TER process. The reviewers will go through this, and if they find a situation like this, they're gonna for sure ask you to explain, to further provide information about this. Then just another one, I go to the last one, MPG provision 21st. It's about the tier selected, and each party should make the every effort to use a recommended method tier level for key categories. And in this case, the country used like tier 1 for key categories, and did not, in this case especially, I would say, did not explain why didn't manage what was the gap, the constraint that didn't allow the country to use a tier 2 or 3 for this key category, which is like the recommended methodology, and didn't address like the issue, and didn't say what is the plan to especially address the issue and overcome the gap in the coming years. So these are just like some of the samples that I want to give you. On top of this, we share kind of more general comments about the review we do, and this is just like a couple tables that are examples. And so we give more general or more technical comments when because obviously before you saw very specific ones about single MPG provisions, but sometimes there are some comments that are a bit more general about a whole chapter, a full section. So obviously this is also included, or maybe also some comments that are like across different sections, and it's just makes sense to address them in a more general comment, in a more general feedback. So this is just like something I wanted to share with you, and I highly encourage all countries that are approaching, like refining a bit it could be also just one chapter, but if you're approaching like the deadline you set yourself to submit to the UNFCCC, this is a step I encourage you to do. We are available to support you in this, and this could help you first increasing a little bit the quality of your BTR before submission to UNFCCC, and secondary, I would say it's pretty important because it gives you a taste, a little trial of what the TR will be like. Obviously, it's not the same because it's not going to be in person. Most of the TR now are pushed to be in country, and it's not a week long, but it's like, I would say, a starting point that help you think a little bit in the review optic, in the view logic. We are also, soon we will publish a couple short pamphlets, short reports about some outcomes we found. We will share it. We will advertise that on our platform, on our website, CBGSP Climate Transparency Platform. And so this was a little bit what we do, and I think for the presentation today, I just want to share with you a few common gaps, common mistakes that we found across all these reviewed BTR drafts that we reviewed here and with the team. We mapped them, and we found out that actually quite some of them are recurring most of the time in most of the reports. So I think for all the countries that are even starting now with the work on the BTR, those who are a bit more advanced, and also who are kind of refining before submission, I think some of these, I'm not gonna be too long on this, but some of these findings I'm gonna share with you could be very useful. I really hope they're gonna be useful and they're gonna help you enhance a bit your BTR draft. So just like a couple of cross-cutting things very quickly, the notation, the use of non-applicable, not estimated, not occurring, they should, and the use of flexibility, they should always be justified and explained. You cannot, because 100% chances that the TR is going to ask you, why is this data in this number here for, I don't know, agriculture sector in this CRT table? Why is this not estimated? You should justify what's the gap, and every time you justify, you explain what the gap is, you should provide them with good reason, and then what are you planning to do to address this? And then another thing on the notation, a measure status can be planned, adopt, or implemented. Please try not to use the word ongoing or under implementation, because that's just like the wording that the Secretariat selected, and just let's try all to stick to it. Again, about flexibility, every time flexibility is used, so it's not, my main message is flexibility is good and can be used, and countries are allowed to use it as much as they want within the MPG, according to the MPGs, obviously. But the only thing that we really require, that is really important to put, is that every time you use flexibility, you should explain why flexibility was used, what was the gap, and by when the party aims to provide the information and stop using flexibility. Like, for example, could be the country plans to address this and stop use flexibility from BTR 2 or 3, and by means of these capacity building in the next couple of years for internal capacity. That could be a simple example. As a good practice, I also recommend a short summary paragraph at the end of the chapter, collecting a little bit like all the flexibility provisions that were used around the chapter. I'll try to go pretty quick about across this, but like these are still some of the main findings, more technical findings that we found in inventory and NDC tracking chapters, which are the two mandatory ones. And so the first one is the level of tier approach, especially for the key categories. While almost most countries conducted like the key category analysis, which is very important, Tier 1 was still largely used instead of the expected approaches, Tier 2 and 3. And so here on the right, I just put like the decision tree that the IPCC recommends. And when unable, I just like, again, it's fine to use it. It's just very important that when you use a low tier for a key category, you describe properly and clearly, you state why this was the choice and why it was impossible, it was not available a higher tier method. So just this, and then plan and timeline to address the gap. So I'll be repetitive, but like this, like flexibility and all these choices, the important thing is not bad to do those. It's just important that you explain clearly why, and then when and how you mean to address those. So the second thing we found in the inventory chapter is the time series consistency. Here I'm also ideally, the time series is reporting from 1990 to 2021, but flexibility can apply it. But even under flexibility, when flexibility is applied, there are some minimum requirements, which is the reference year for the NDC, a consistent annual time series from at least 2020, and then latest inventory year can be 3 years prior to the inventory submission. So here I'm just like showing you a little example. I extrapolated this table from a draft BTR. And you can see, and then on the right, I put the 3 recommendations that are a TR examination, a TR review process is gonna come up with this question, and you, in any case, you will be requested to explain those. So for example, the country NDC based year was 2015. But the minimum requirement is also about this year. So this information was supposed to be included in the table. The IPPU sector for 2019, you can see is not reported. So that's a consistency issue because we're missing 1 year. Obviously, this number can be calculated and by interpolation and by other means, but this should be also reported. And then the inventory was submitted in 2024. But the last year reported is 2020, so we are missing 1 year for the minimum requirements under the flexibility. So this is just a little example that I think could help you stick to eventually the minimum requirements, but like to comply with the MPGs provisions. Going to the NDC tracking chapter, I think we bumped multiple times in some indicators that were selected, I would say, a bit like in a confusing way, and sometimes they were not necessary, sometimes they were not really aligned with the proper NDC, and sometimes were just actually bringing an additional burden to the BTR team, because some countries selected a lot of indicators, multiple indicators, and for each of these indicators, obviously, the party is supposed to provide the methodology, to have an extensive database, historical data, and then and also quantify the progress for each of these indicators across the years. So sometimes I would say the selection of indicators could be a little bit improved, can be done also a bit, I want to say, in a smart way, in the meanings of not complicating your life too much, especially since it's the first BTR, and I would always suggest to stick to the fewer and the most important indicators that you have listed in your NDC. And then if you feel obviously confident about some other indicators for which you have a lot of data and you can provide a good description of them, then obviously, yeah, feel free to go for it because it's additional information. It's like very valuable. But in general, I would say, especially for the first BTR, it's a good idea to stick to few indicators and to be fully consistent and complete about their reporting. These were just the recommendation and some best practices. Always carefully define the indicator and its methodology, the unit of measure, which you might be surprised, but many times we found an indicator without unit of measure defined. And so that's going to be something that the TR process is going to come up with. And sectoral, geographical scope. So try to be as clear as possible with your indicators. Then I'm going to go back quickly to the PAM, to the policies, action, and measures reporting. They get reported both in textual format and in CTF table 5. Often the countries have report like broad environmental plans, which are very with a very broad scope, without defined measures, without clear identification of who's going to implement which measure. And sometimes this makes very complicated to estimate the achieved and expected, especially emission reduction that you have to report in the CTF table 5. So, and then same can be said for the adaptation measures with co-mitigation benefits. I just wanna report a good example, this table here. And for example, on the left, I hope you can all see, it's a bit small, but I try to select very few lines. On the left, we have the major policy, which is very broad one. And then this got broke down into small pieces. I selected only 3, but this single measure was broke down into 8 measures. And every measure was like a single measure, very specific, that could be easily quantified, assessed, and for each one, the clear methodology can be established. Like, for example, you can see here introduction of industrial heat pumps, introduction of industrial high efficiency lighting. So once we break down like a broader measure into smaller measures, it's easier to quantify, to create a methodology, to know where to get the data, and to report the estimates for the GHG emission reduction. So I think this is a good example, especially when we have to deal with these massive environmental and mitigation plans that are touching many sectors at the same time. I think it's a good idea to break them down for transparency. And then last one, about projections. Projection is a very tricky topic, starting from the naming of the projections. So we have a with measure scenario, which is the only shall scenario that should be reported. And then we have a without measure and with additional measure scenarios, which are 2 additional scenarios that the countries encourage to report. And just about this, it's important, the projection year, they should be extended 15 years after the next year, and then in 5 or 0 after the last NDC, or the last inventory years also, depending on which one is the most recent one. And so, for example, now we should extend those until at least 2040. That's the minimum. So please, if you have some projection to 2030, 2035, because most countries reported projection to 2030 because that's the NDC time period, but actually a projection should extend at least 10 years after that. So I just want you to keep in mind to try not to forget these things, and also last, assumption and methodology should be reported for each reported projection. Just as good practices, these are some graphs that I took from some, these are good practices. These I took from different BTRs. And here you can see, for example, in the first one to the top left, you can see the historical emissions and WEM projections. So with existing measure, the blue line, and then on top of that, the one projection was depicted on top, so was projected on top of it, and you can see the effect of the additional measures. Little gap in this one projection should also extend to 2040 and not finish to 2035. So this is a little gap, a little note that can be made to the country that submitted this BTR. On the bottom, you can see another graph, which is a stacked graph divided by sector, because also the emission projection should be reported by sector and by gas. And then on the right, on the top right, I also like this graph because on top of having the projection, so we have the BAU, the business as usual, which is the without measure scenario. And then we have the light blue one, like light blue gray line, which is a bit below it, is with the existing measure scenario. And then on top of this, especially to the left, the country reported the actual inventory emissions with the yellow dots. And I think this is pretty informative and helps like visualizing pretty well where the country is standing and what is the expected outcome on this. Then the dashed scenario, you can see, which has two different scenarios, is like with additional measure scenarios. And I think these are some good examples of what can be done in this chapter. So thank you. I don't know if there is any question. I'll be happy to answer those. I hope I didn't go too long with this presentation, didn't get you bored.
No, definitely not, Francesco. Thank you so much for sharing your presentation on the self-assessment tools, the GSV self-assessment tool, and some of the main findings. So I'd like to, as Francesco mentioned, open the floor for questions on this tool, or perhaps on the experience where to access the self-assessment tool or any of the other tools. So the floor is open if anyone has anything. You could feel free to raise your hand and unmute. I did see one hand earlier, and was from Paulo. Do you still have a question, Paulo? Okay, we have from Crystal Bethel. Ms. Bethel, please go ahead.
Yes, I would like to know where you can access the tools. Is there a website, platform?
So we have the Climate Transparency Platform, which is our website where we post all the event, all the news, all the material, the knowledge products. So the knowledge products are not published yet, but they will be pretty soon. And the tool, so the Excel tool, I think we will upload in the page of this same webinar together with the presentations. So you will be able to just download it. I think I don't know if today or by tomorrow, all the material will be uploaded on the platform. And yeah.
Thanks so much, Francesco.
Thank you.
So that's right. For this specific tool, we will have it uploaded on the event page, the one that you registered on, or in the agenda. So that page on the Climate Transparency Platform, but we will be uploading it officially to the tools page, as Francesco mentioned. You'll have it within the next 2 days. By tomorrow, everything should be uploaded on the platform. Mr. Hunter, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Whitney, and thank you very much, Francesco, for a wonderful presentation. Are you hearing me clearly?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sure Dominica is very interested because we are very far we are doing a BUR1 BTR combo. And in terms of the review, how do we contact you all in terms of when we're ready to do the review? What's the process of contacting you all for that review?
You just need to contact Brittany or and through her, or you can also just send an email to me. And I don't know if you know our colleague Fernando Farias is an expert reviewer that's working with us at here in Copenhagen. So just reach out to one of us by email, and then we will come back to you. And yeah, it's just about sharing a draft, and we can start the process right away.
So just a follow up. So as I said, we can do a review by chapters. So could we send the chapters we are basically completed already, so that instead of the review thing first? Yeah, okay.
You can send the NDC chapter tomorrow, and then in 1 month you can send the inventory chapter, and that's all fine. You will get feedback step by step.
Okay, all right. So I'll be in contact with you very soon. Read that.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. That's good news. So yes, thanks, Francesco. Thank you, Edgar, for that. So as a reminder, also you can also share your drafts by chapter to undergo this review if you don't have a complete document ready. Very good. Thank you, colleagues. Do you have any other questions or comments? Comments from the floor? If not, then I'd like to thank you, Francesco, again for sharing the tools and also some of the key findings. I think you took us up through some of the findings on some of the most difficult chapters for the BTR. So you mentioned the inventory and the NDC tracking as well as projections. So thank you very much for that, and we'll make sure that everyone has access to this tool as well as the other tools that Civic GSP has made available in preparation for the BTR. One thing that wasn't mentioned is that we also have a template tool for the National Inventory Report, the GHG Inventory Report chapter. So for those who are still working on their inventories, you can use that template to guide you to know what sections, what tables to include. Okay, colleagues. Well, to keep us on track, remember I mentioned that we'd be asking everyone to take a short group photo. This is your time, please, if you can, and if you're able to, we welcome you to turn on your cameras for a brief moment so that we can take a group photo. Well, I know some of us are in different places. Some of us may be at Climate Week this week. Okay. Hi, everyone. Okay, so let me take a series of photos. They have a few pages. Get pictures out. Take another one on page 2. One more. There with us. I see hi to our colleagues from Bahamas, Grenada, Antigua, Dominica, Suriname. Okay. Thank you very much, colleagues, and nice to see you all, see your faces for a change. It's been some time. Thank you very much for indulging us in that. And so to take us, to carry us through the next part of the webinar, we will be hearing from our three countries of the region who submitted their BTRs in December and in 2024 last year. So we have our colleagues from Belize, Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana who will be sharing their experiences with us. So our first on the list is Belize, and I'd like to introduce Ms. Camille Salazar, MRV Officer at the National Climate Change Office, the Ministry of Sustainable Development and Climate Change in Belize. Please, you're welcome to share your screen and give us your please. And then we will have questions at the end, brief questions at the end of each session. Welcome, Camille.
Hi, Brittany. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the introduction and for the invitation for us as Belize to share our experience on the development of our BTR. Let me just share my screen with the presentation. And if you could just confirm that you are seeing it in presentation mode.
I can see it. It's, if you click that button, it will be in presentation. Yes, you're good.
Good. Okay, thank you. So we were one of the countries that submitted our BTR on December 31st, 2024. So we met the deadline. As I go through the presentation, you'll realize that our main goal was to meet this deadline. So we did apply like several flexibilities, but we did do our best in anything, as much of the requirements for the MPGs as we could while we were developing it. So this is basically what our BTR included. We had our national circumstances chapter, our greenhouse gas inventory chapter. For this one, we also submitted our national inventory document as a standalone document. So as for the MPGs, we only needed to provide a summary of the inventory itself in our BTR. So that's what we did with this submission. And then for the information necessary to track progress, so the NDC tracking chapter, we included a description of our NDC, tracking of the NDC indicators, mitigation policies, the PAN section, and the flexibility provisions that we had applied. And for some reason, the last two aren't showing, but we also provided information on adaptation and as well as the support needed and received for over the past year. This BTR will, as you know, reported information up to 2022. So what were some of the institutional and coordination challenges that we had? Firstly, it was definitely a lack of internal capacity. So our office is very small. It's about 5 people. And what we did was sort of separated some of the chapters. So early on, we assigned it to, for example, our adaptation officer would have done the adaptation related chapter. We have a QAC officer, so he would have been responsible for the ensuring the quality assurance, and then also so just assigning it based on different sections like that. When it came to the greenhouse gas inventory, we had new and inexperienced sector leads. So for the 3 of the 5 sectors, only 2 of them had been previously a part of the process. So that was for energy and forest. Our forest sector, these 2 sectors actually were lucky that they're pretty advanced. So we kind of give them like their own space, of course, while meeting with them as much as we can, but we can rely on them to know that they know what they're doing and they'll submit the information that's needed. And when they have to, then they reach out to us for any questions. But for waste, agriculture, and IPPU, these 3 sectors all had new sector leads. And just as an FYI, when I say sector leads, these are people within government from each one of these sectors that from the very onset have been agreed or assigned by maybe their supervisor to be the person responsible to assist us here at the National Climate Change Office with the development of these reports. So for waste, it was a new person, agriculture, a new person, and IPPU, a new person. So this definitely created some challenges for us with them understanding the entire process, understanding what data was needed, then compiling that data, even doing like the summary reports that would later be compiled into the overall national inventory. So that was definitely one of our biggest challenges. And then getting the buy-in of all of the sector leads. So I think because they were new, they didn't quite see the importance of it right away. And to be honest, it did feel to them like we were just giving them extra work, which is very much understandable because these are people who are in their primary job roles and have their own responsibilities. So this is sort of like extra work for them. Some other challenges included receiving data on time. So we started this process way in advance and we tried our best to get data, but it did rely on a lot of persistent or continuous reminders from us to them. In the end, we were able to get it, but I think when we submitted this report, many of our stakeholders were glad so that we could leave them alone. But and then meeting the deadlines, again, this relates to getting that data online, on time, and then the consistent attendance. So we had a lot of what we called isolation sessions. So we would take our sector leads and ourselves and try to go somewhere outside of the office and outside of the city so that we wouldn't have interruptions or distractions, and also so that it wasn't somewhere in driving distance where they could just like, quickly leave to go check something and then come back. And this really helped a lot because while we're there, we're actively working. I mean, we really didn't have anything else, or they didn't have another choice but to actually work on it. But it really helped because while we're there working on it, we realized that questions come up or queries come up while they're actually in the process of developing these reports. And so it helps that we were in the room while they had these questions. We also had support from some regional entities, so with GSP being one of them. We're also a part of the regional Climate Action Transparency Hub for Central America under ICAT, so we were able to get assistance from them as well. And then we had hired a consultant for NDC tracking chapter. So these, as much as possible, they were also a part of these isolation sessions to be able to answer these questions when they came up in the moment. The most difficult, I'd say the NDC tracking chapter, it's not that it was really difficult. I think one of the biggest problems goes back to the lack of data. So our NDC, just to give you some background, had 192 indicators. That's what we had developed when we did the NDC 2.0 and its implementation plan. Of course, in the moment, I don't think we realized what having 192 indicators would mean until it actually came to this time last year when we were drafting this chapter. Instead, what we did is used an overall like aggregate indicator that was in the beginning of our NDC. The NDC, which basically said that by accomplishing all of the targets, we would avoid this much emissions. So we went ahead and used that indicator because it would have just been impossible to report on all 192 indicators. Right now, we're in the process of updating our NEC 3.0, and that will require an updated implementation plan as well. So we're looking to do an exercise of revising those existing indicators and trying to decrease the amount that we have. And then as is that indicator that we had, as I mentioned, it said by accomplishing all these indicators, we would avoid X amount of emissions by this much. That required some projections that we didn't have the capacity to do, nor the time to do it. Again, our main goal being to meet that December 31st deadline. So instead, we relied a lot on project information and the level of implementation. We have an MRB system and an NDC implementation plan tool, since Belize is a part of the NDC partnership as well. So we keep track of the progress of our NDC by the implementation of our project and what projects that we have on board in the country and how they relate to the different targets within the different sectors. So that's how we reported this information. When it came to the PAM section, we were able to identify and provide updates on the different policies and actions and measures that we have in Belize that also contribute to the implementation of the NDC. But there is also that section that asks to report on, what would be the projected impact of these policies for the NDC. And so that's where we also applied a flexibility because, again, we didn't have the capacity or the time to do that part. When it came to the greenhouse gas inventory, I mean, this, as I mentioned this already with our new sector leads, so that being one of the hardest part. And then also that timely data collection. We started the process I mentioned from very early on, but it still required like a lot of time or a lot of, reminders for us to get this data and then doing the actual data collection. So we actually received support again for this. And they helped a lot, especially with those three sectors, the waste, the agriculture and IPPU, because the sector leads, they did help with collecting the information and sort of drafting the summary reports and doing like analysis. But when it came to using the IPCC software and doing the actual calculations, that definitely would have required more training and more capacity building and more time for them to be prepared to do that calculation. And then for the key category analysis, this is also somewhere else where we applied some flexibility. And again, because our goal being to meet that deadline in December 31st, we only did a qualitative description. And so this is just a screenshot that I thought to include. This is how we reported the progress of our NDC. I mentioned via project implementation. So just to give an example of both adaptation and mitigation, the target on top highlighted in the dark green and the dark pink, that's directly taken from the NDC. And then we have the project below, the duration, who's responsible, and then a brief description and whatever updates that we had available up to the time of the submission, that's what we included. So this is how we at the time reported our progress of our NDC implementation. So we have an MRV system. It was developed under a project that we had with ICAT. So this was used. I also mentioned the NDC plan tool under the NDC partnership. I forgot to just to put it on the screen, but we also used those two things. So the NDC plan tool is used mainly by the NDC implementation and facilitator person that we had in country, and they meet regularly outside of the purpose for the BTR. They meet regularly with stakeholders to get update on the different targets, and then they would include that information on the system. So that did make it a little bit easier for us to report on the NDC progress. And then outside of that, we have a national system for Belize that developed under ICAT. And so this does include an online system, but the system isn't only that, it also includes, the entire institutional arrangements, how the entire process works for the sector leads, how data flows from the onset of data collection and sharing. So also having this in place helped us to be able to know where to go, what to do, what data we needed to collect. So this was also a big help. We also use the IPCC software for all the sectors except the forest sector, mostly because for us in Belize, the forest department gets a lot of support from CFRN. And so together they had developed their own system to calculate the forest sector emissions. So that's the only sector that did not use the IPCC software. But luckily we were able to use that again with support. And then we conducted some surveys throughout the process because a majority, especially for the greenhouse inventories tier 1, what we want to do for the next BTR and greenhouse gas inventories, move up at least 1 tier, but if we can, 2 tiers. So we use this opportunity, since we were meeting with stakeholders as well, to identify what data was needed and what already exists, where the data is, and how we could incorporate some of these improvements for the next one. But the surveys were a big help, because especially in identifying what data exists, and so it made us, stop searching for data that wasn't there, and instead we will try to improve on that next year and actually create ways on how we can start to collect this data. So integrating the ETF requirements, most of the information for the BTR or the chapters were chapters that we had already reported on. So our national circumstances, we've done that before for the BUR and even national communications. Same for support needed and received. We've reported this before. Same for adaptation information. So the newest chapters, as you know, is the NDC tracking chapter. We referred a lot to the MPGs. I think this was like our Bible throughout the year last year. We had it printed out, and we referred to it a lot to ensure that we were reporting what information was required of us. When we couldn't report on something, we tried our best to explain why. When we used flexibilities, we tried to explain why, and include a sort of plan, or at least what we hope to achieve in the next BTR for improvements. We also had several capacity building sessions in the lead up of the BTR, and then during the actual development of the BTR as well. So we had an ICAT project ongoing, which allowed us to have several capacity building sessions. This included NDC tracking training, the IPCC guidelines training, doing data collection. And so even with Civic GSP, we got some support. ICAT, the regional hub that I mentioned, so that we were really lucky in that way. And throughout the process, we also reached out to some of these entities and asked them to do a quick review of what we had available at the time to provide any feedback, especially to ensure that we were complying with the ETF requirements. When it comes to the quality and consistency of the information, so I mentioned the isolation sessions. Outside of that, we also had different stakeholder meetings, and we would rely on their expertise to help us to verify some of the sources. We consulted with them throughout the entire process. We conducted several peer reviews of the reports and the data, and then we had a validation session at the end. And then, of course, referring to the MPGs throughout as well. So this is some of the capacity building. I'll just skip over this because I think I may be going over time, but some of the support that we received. And then when we prepared for the submission, we set a deadline. We tried our best to meet that deadline. We tried our best to have a draft ready as well, that we could start sharing with the stakeholders to get feedback. And then internally, because we have to submit it to our cabinet for approval, we started the drafting of our cabinet paper as soon as possible. And so when the final time came to submit this, we only needed to update on the revisions that we did. And we also met with our CEO and minister throughout, when possible, to update them and brief them to sort of ensure that that endorsement would happen smoothly at the end, and we could submit. So I think I already mentioned some of these, but start as early as possible with the resources that you have available. So we started having meetings as early in the year from January last year. And this was before we actually got access to the funds of our NC and BTR project. We got approval for it, but due to some internal administrative difficulties, it took a long time for us to actually get access to the funds. So we started as early as possible, even if it just included virtual meetings or just meetings in our conference room. And we did what we could there. I mentioned the isolation sessions, identifying your needs and constraints as early on as possible as well, so that this could be addressed before they arrive or before the time comes that you actually need those. Be involved in the process as well, even if you hire consultants or you get support from others. And if it's possible to have more than one person involved from your office or your department, so that this capacity and this experience stays with you in the office. Shadow the consultant, as much as you can, stay abreast of the data that they're using and the processes that they do. And one of our biggest lessons learned, I think, was that first that we should have had a cutoff date for data collection, because we still accepted data, and then we kept having to go back and revise, and then we kept having to go back to do another review with stakeholders, and it kind of delayed the process a little bit. So I think a cutoff date in advance, so that you have a time dedicated only to drafting and review, and you can finalize. And then doing an early review to allow enough time for revision. Thank you very much, and I apologize if I went over time, but I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Camille, thank you so much for your very comprehensive presentation. Clearly, a lot of valuable advice and expertise. It's also happy to witness some of the very efficient way that your team Belize got through some of the administrative things to get your BTR done. So I would like to ask our colleagues, our friends in the room for your questions. If you could please leave your questions in the chat for Camille on any specific area that you had from her presentation. But to facilitate the time that we have, we will address the questions in the chat, and we will continue hearing from our other colleagues in the room. Our other countries who submitted their BTR. But I would just like to say thank you again, Camille, for sharing wholeheartedly that experience from Belize. We really appreciate it. And so now I would like to invite and hear from Ms. Trina Dinu Ramlachan, Senior Environmental Officer at the Environmental Management Authority at Trinidad and Tobago, to hear from your experience in preparation for your BTR1 submission. So the floor is yours, Trina. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brittany, for that introduction. And this morning, it is my pleasure to, it's my pleasure to present on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago on the insights, challenges, and lessons learned in the preparation and submission of our first biennial transparency reports. Just an overview of, we submitted our BTR1 on December 30th, 2024. Work began for the actual report in January 2024. However, with respect to the greenhouse gas inventory data collection, that began in 2023. The report was coordinated by the Ministry of Planning and Development. We had a change of name, so it's now known as the Ministry of Planning, Economic Affairs and Development, and it was executed by the Environmental Management Authority, specifically the Air Unit. We must acknowledge the contributions and assistance provided by the Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency Global Support Program, as well as the Trinidad and Tobago CBIT project team, who executed the project strengthening Trinidad and Tobago's capacity in transparency for climate change mitigation and adaptation. With respect to the institutional and coordination challenges, we summarized it in 3 main challenges. There was fragmented data ownership among institutions, limited MRV capacity, as well as coordination gaps. And from the presentation of Belize, I realized that we did have very similar challenges. Trinidad and Tobago launched its National Climate Mitigation Monitoring, Reporting and Verification System in 2018. And at the heart of the system was the knowledge management system, which was used for greenhouse gas data collection. However, there was no centralized database that contained all the information necessary to track progress in implementing and achieving our NDCs, information on climate change impacts and adaptation, and information on financial technology transfer and capacity building support needed and received. This challenge was addressed through that CBIT project that strengthened Trinidad and Tobago's capacity for transparency in climate change, mitigation and adaptation. That project was executed over the period 2021 to September 2024. And that project developed the indicators, templates, protocols, and guides that supports the tracking of the mitigation and adaptation actions as well as financial. And in 2024, we expanded the knowledge management system, rebranded it to the National Transparency System. And that system now facilitates the collection, analysis, and reporting of data related not only to GHG emissions, but also the mitigation activities and support received for NDC implementation. Similarly, to Belize, we have a very small team for implementing and working on that worked on the BTR. Our team is really 2 persons, and between the 2 of us, we separated the chapters. We also are the sector leads for the GHG inventory. 1 person does energy, agriculture, and forestry, and 1 person does IPPU and waste. So we do have a lot on our shoulders with respect to collecting the data. Unfortunately, that is one of the challenges that is still ongoing, because during the BTR process, we got 2 associate professionals to help us with the data collection. However, they have left the AME, so it still remains just 2 of us collecting the data and also working towards the preparation now of BTR2. With respect to the technical difficulties, similarly with the GHG inventory, as Belize, we also had data issues specifically for the agriculture, land use, forestry sectors and the waste sector. Data collection in these sectors are limited because, especially in the agriculture sector, because of limited resources, and FAO datasets were highly relied on for the compilation of that inventory. And we did not use the National Inventory Report template. However, we tried our best to, in the chapter, to put all the information that the MPGs required. But we do intend in our future reporting to use that National Inventory Reporting template. Because the indicators developed to track mitigation, adaptation, and finance was new, these stakeholders through that CBIT project also, they were able to verify these indicators, and there were a number of stakeholders training sessions introducing them to the indicators. There was stakeholder mapping done to identify the specific data collectors to each indicator. However, because that process was brand new and stakeholders were now getting introduced to it, the data itself was not collected for BTR1. But we are using these templates and rolling out the National Transparency System this year. So we actually started in April. We had sessions and we sent out letters for data collection for our GHG inventory as well as the mitigation indicators. And so we're hoping, because we are now starting early, we will have those chapters and specific tables ready for BTR2. So even though with respect to adaptation, because Trinidad and Tobago also submitted their National Adaptation Plan in 2024, we opted we used flexibility in the having that adaptation chapter in our BTR1, because our National Adaptation Plan also served as our national, our first adaptation communication. Although this did contain the priorities and strategies, it really did not track the indicators. So with those CTF tables, we really were not able to complete all the information needed. as well as the projections similar to Belize. We also lacked the capacity to do it in-house, as well as the time constraints. The data collection and management tools, we found the IPCC 2006 guidelines and workbooks extremely effective. We also customized Excel templates, and we streamlined our MRV system. So for Trinidad and Tobago, we actually developed a national inventory systems manual. And that manual contains a number of checklists as well as the data collection templates. So we used that to help us. Again, the lack of having that central data repository and the gaps proved challenging. There was also inconsistent data formats and reporting timelines across agencies. With respect to the ETF tool, because of having limited training and experience in the use of the tool, we found it a bit challenging. We did not use the IPCC software. We used spreadsheets, and so it was not a straightforward upload into the ETF tool. We actually manually inputted some of the data into that ETF tool to complete it. And so we really need some more training in that aspect. And we have been attending all the regional workshops, etc., that related to the training that has been offered for that ETF tool. With respect to the ETF requirements, we also used those MPGs as our Bibles last year in preparing the BTR1. We reviewed each of the requirements. We compiled our own checklists and tried to ensure that the chapters aligned, the templates aligned to the MPGs as well. We built on experiences from the previous biennial update reports and national communications. So because of the time constraints, we actually mirrored the template from the last biennial update report, included the chapter on mitigation, and we also expanded on the national, on the greenhouse gas inventory chapter. We also focused on capacity building and institutional strengthening, and this was mainly done through that CBID project. We conducted a number of stakeholder sessions, and we also emphasized data quality assurance and quality control. We provided a checklist for the GHG inventory stakeholders so that when doing their collecting their activity data, etc., they can look at that checklist to assure the quality of it as well. So the quality and consistency strategies, we engaged in the technical experts to review the report. So we were very appreciative of CBID GSP for providing that technical support. They provided excellent feedback on our draft report that helped us refine it for submission. As stated before, we have our GHG, we have a QA/QC plan for our GHG inventory, which we followed, as well as the standardized templates and guidelines from the UNFCCC. With respect to our BTR submission, we participated in a number of training sessions and workshops that prepared us for that BTR submission. We familiarized ourselves with the BTR reporting tools, the MPGs. There were times we could have actually repeated some of those MPGs word for word because of how intimate we became with them. We also established a reporting timeline and an internal review procedure as well, because the chapters were reviewed internally by the AMA as well as submitted to our line ministry, the Ministry of Planning and Development, for their review. And because of establishing these strict reporting timelines and sticking to the deadlines, we were able to submit our report before that December 31st deadline. One of the things we found useful, the two of us that did the report, we also started doing the technical expert reviewer exams, which we found very useful because it actually helped us to see what is looked for when doing these technical reviews. And so we tried our best to incorporate those requirements within our reports. And our advice to other countries: start early, and invest in institutional capacity, establish a robust coordination mechanism, and prioritize data management systems, and also engage stakeholders from the beginning and ensure continuous capacity building. So I'm open for questions, and thanks so much, Brittany, for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Trina, for your presentation and for sharing this valuable advice and feedback for countries who are starting and engaged in this process. So I'd like to remind everyone to please put your questions after each presenter in the chat. We are coming close to the end of time, but I will ask your indulgence for another 15 minutes so that we can hear from our last speaker, as well as address some of a few of the questions that each of you had. But yes, I'd like to say thank you again, Trina, for your wonderful presentation, and well done with a very short staff team, two-person team, two-woman team, I should say, from Trinidad and Tobago, for getting your BTR done. So now I'd like to welcome our last speaker, and I know we're coming to the end of time, but we definitely want to hear from the first country in the Caribbean region who submitted their BTR last year, Guyana. So I'd like to introduce Ms. Maria Swigrim from the Guyana Forestry Commission at the Ministry of Natural Resources to share Guyana's experience in preparing their BTR. So Maria, the floor is yours. Hi, Maria, we can see you, but your mic is off. Just let me.
Sorry. Good morning, everyone. Again, I'd like to say thanks to Brittany. I would like to share today with you from the Guyana's experience in submitting their BTR, their Biennial Transparency Report. So I would just like to say that some of the, I'm sorry, trying to get this screen. Is it on? Some of the most institutional or coordinating challenges that we would have encountered in preparing our BTR is that there was a small staff complement within the Department of Environmental and Climate Change to coordinate the activity. So the capacity was really small, so we had to work with what we had there. Sorry, trying to get this slide.
Can you, I have it shared on the screen. Maria, just let me know if you can see it in full screen.
No, it's not in full screen.
And now? Not yet. Sorry, just confirming if it is now.
It's not in full screen, but I can continue, and but then they might want to see the slide. Can I try here?
Yes, sure, go ahead.
I'm not getting it. Sorry.
Let me return to sharing it if that's okay.
Yeah, but this one?
Okay, let me know now if you can see it.
Yeah, I'm seeing it now. It's on.
Okay.
So everybody's getting to see the slide now?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so from our Guyana's perspective, one of the institutional or coordinating challenges that we would have had is that within the Department of Environmental and Climate Change, there was a small staff complement in order to coordinate our activities or the capacity to do so. The second is that private sector and their awareness of their role within the process was a little technical for them, since this was the first time in experience for them as well in terms of the process of the whole new BTR submission. Can I have the next slide? So the technical difficulties in specific chapter in which we would have encountered is within the greenhouse gas emission. Why? It was because accessing information from the sector was a little difficult, and the capacity of the sector as well was, of course, limited capacity. So that is one of the difficulties we would have experienced within that chapter. Can I have the next slide, please? Data collection and management tools. Guyana found the CRT table of the GHG most challenging because it was submitted initially after we would have submitted our BTR in April of 2024. So the CRT table was a bit challenging for us, but of course it's a learning process. So that was it for us. Next slide, please. The integration of the ETF requirement. The followed requirements set out in the template, the multi-sectoral approach, and the guidance from international experts. So those are the two integration requirements in which we would have had to seek assistance with. What strategies were used to ensure the quality and consistency of the reported information? So Guyana would have followed the guidance set out in the IPCC 2006 guidelines and the 2019 refinement. Also, the QA plus QC procedures are some of the strategy in which we would have adopted as well. How did we prepare for the submission process itself? So compilation was a collaborative effort among the agency specialists, coordinated by DEC, of course, which is the department that worked closely in compilation of the BTR, along with consultants. Sector experts were integrally involved and consulted from the onset. So from the beginning, they were involved in the whole process. Multiple working sessions were also involved in order to get all the sectors all the sector involved in the entire process. So that is how we would have prepared for getting them familiarized with the whole process by itself and the tools involved. Next slide. One key piece of advice we would give to country currently is Guyana from early was cognizant of its limitation in terms of human and technical capabilities. Hence, we would have utilized the flexibility option offered through the BTR process, and we compiled and submitted our BTR while still working with the outstanding section that require more inputs. So that is something that we would have adopted, and still was a working process along with that. So I would like to say, if you have any questions, you can ask in the comment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Maria, for your presentation and for also hitting those, salient points from Guyana's experience. And I can see from the three countries who submitted, there are a lot of similarities in, technical constraints, team sizes, and also working within using national stakeholders and consultants and even interns in some countries' cases. So I know we're a little bit over time, but I wanted to just open the floor to capture any key comments or reflections from the floor on the three speakers that just passed, Belize, Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana. So I see we have a few in the chat. We have one on data collection. We have a question on Trinidad CBIT project, if it's available to be shared or if it's available online. And then we also have a question on, is all BTR funding done through the JEF for the countries that haven't started as yet?
Hi, Brittany. So for Trinidad and Tobago, with respect to the CBIT project, I know some of the information is online, but it depends on what exactly person would like to know. You can contact me. I can leave my email on the chat. So for persons who would like to know more about that project and what it accomplished, I'll be willing to engage on that conversation.
Thank you. Thanks so much for extending that support, Trina. I think definitely other countries in this region are also looking to build out their own CBIT projects. So that might be, the source of inspiration to see how other countries have done it. Very good. So please feel free to get in touch with Trina on that. She left her email in the chat. And I just wanted to address the question on the BTR funding. So if all BTR funding is done through JEF, so the majority of countries, and I think all the countries in this region, except for maybe one, has access JEF funds for their BTR projects, either a combined BTR and national communication project, or some repackaging of some existing national communication and BUR project that they had. So I think countries that are in the process now have either accessed their funds or are in some stage of accessing their JEF funds. But I hope that answers your question. But as we have heard from our three speakers, in some cases, even before funding, the starting early to try to plan your human resources and your time would be important even before you access the funds. This may take some time. Good, I see a thumbs up. And then we had another question on data collection. So I see Camille has answered that in the chat for how capacity on data collection and how was that built at the country level. So Camille, maybe if you don't mind just going on mic for a little while, just for the others to hear, and then we can take any
Sure.
other questions in chat.
Sure. Yeah, I just responded. So when we carried out some sector-specific training, so for example, the transport sector under energy, they were entirely new to the entire MRV concept, BTR reporting, and what are MPGs to them. They had no idea what we were talking about. So we had an opportunity under ICAP where we got a consultant to come in country, and then we had like a crash course on the entire, from the very beginning, introducing what is MRV, what exactly is the GHG, and then trying to have a focus on the importance of these reports to them as well, and how the data can help them. So that was like, for example, because that sector was the one that was like completely new to it, we did a training just for them. So it was only transport people. So, and it was small, maybe about 10 people, just for them. We also carried out other trainings throughout the year, for example, on the IPCC training, which was also under ICAP, but we got support actually from CBIT GSP, and actually Brittany was the one who helped us with this. And we provided, training on the IPCC guidelines and the calculations, but also having a focus on each of the individual sectors for them. And then when the actual data collection time came, internally at the NTCO, we had created surveys and actual Excel tables with the specific data that was needed by year. And we shared this with them so that they understood exactly what data we were asking them for.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Camille. And I think maybe in future sessions, we can also do some exchanges on some of these tools that at the country level that you've developed. I think that'd be very helpful. I know probably to our colleagues here from Dominica who are active in the stage. But thank you so much for sharing that, and to all three of our countries, Belize, Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana, for sharing your experience and also giving those nuggets of advice to countries. And also for those who will be yourselves who will be working on BTR2 soon. I know that there's always room for growth in that area. So I would like to thank also everyone for giving us a little bit extra time on today's webinar. I think it was important that we heard from everyone, and please feel free to use this network and to access us on the Climate Transparency platform. And also we've received invitations to reach directly to some of our colleagues from the countries if you have further specific information on their activities and their experience. As a last measure of today's webinar, I would like to ask you to just kindly quickly return to the Mentimeter that we were on. It's the same link, and it's just a final survey for workshop for webinar survey. So let me share my screen very quickly. This is where we were. So please let us know. And we had some of you answer already. One word that you're feeling about your BTR preparation journey. Daunting, challenging, I see is the biggest one. Interesting. So minimal, rewarding, I think that's one of them. Very good. So thank you for sharing this. Rushed. This is the case for many of us. Thank you for sharing this. This is, you can see, many think it's challenging. And other topics that you'd like to see covered in more detail in the future. I see we have a lot of interest in inventory, GHG inventory methodologies, as well as reporting tools and NDC tracking on arrangements as well. So we'll definitely keep this in mind, and thank you for your feedback here. And then please do continue to let us know your satisfaction with today's webinar. You will have access to this Mentimeter link for another 24 hours or so. So please do let us know, and this helps us to improve for following webinar sessions and virtual engagements. I'd like to say again, thank you to everyone for joining us and giving us your time, and also to our speakers to sharing about the tools, and from our countries to give us your valuable experience. We will be posting the presentations as well as the CIBIT GSP quality assessment tool on the platform, on the link that it was shared in the chat, and we will follow it with a email letting you know that it is all there. But thank you again, everyone, and wishing you a wonderful rest of your day. See you next time.